They told me never to open the trailer. No questions, no paperwork. Just drive from El Paso to Austin, take the cash, and forget the number painted on the container. 42. But halfway through the desert, in the dead black of night, something inside that steel box started breathing. I swear to God, I heard it. Slow, wet, human. And when I stopped to check, someone whispered my name from the other side of the door. My name. I've hauled everything in 20 years behind the wheel. Fuel, livestock, even coffins once. But never a secret this heavy. Whatever's in that trailer, it's alive, and it knows who I am. If you think you've got the guts to find out what I did next, hit that like button, subscribe, and listen till the end. Because once you know what Cargo 42 really is, you'll never look at a truck on the highway the same way again. Ray Harper had been driving for as long as he could remember. 45 years old, former Marine, and now a man with a rusted Peterbilt that roared louder than his heart ever did. The truck was his home, his confession booth, and his punishment. The radio barely worked, the air smelled like diesel and coffee grounds, and the Nevada horizon stretched flat and cruel, just like his luck. After the collapse of his old company, Harper Freight, Ray picked up whatever runs he could find, cheap, dirty, and often under the table. He told himself it was temporary, just until the bank stopped calling about his mortgage. But temporary had stretched into 2 years and a dozen broken promises. That morning in El Paso, he stood outside a small logistics office that looked more like a pawn shop than a freight company. A sign over the door read, Keller Transport Solutions, its letters peeling under the desert sun. Inside, the air was stale and smelled of paper and sweat. Behind the counter sat a heavy-set man with a buzz cut and mirrored sunglasses. Even indoors, he looked Ray over like someone checking the mileage on a used car. "You Harper?" he asked without looking up from his clipboard. "Yeah," Ray said, scratching his beard. "Got a call about a run to Austin. Something fast." The man nodded. "Container 42. Pick it up behind the yard. Delivery point's an industrial park outside Austin. You don't ask questions. You don't open the trailer. Pays $5,000 cash." Ray blinked. "No manifest?" "No paperwork," the man said flatly. "No digital log either. You keep it off your ELD. And one more thing." He leaned closer. "You don't talk about this job to anyone. You'll get a bonus if you keep quiet." Ray stared at him. "What kind of cargo are we talking about?" The man smiled without humor. "The kind that doesn't like daylight." There was a moment of silence. The hum of a distant air conditioner filled the room. Ray's gut twisted. Every instinct he had, Marine, trucker, man who'd seen enough, screamed that this was bad news. But $5,000 in cash meant he could keep his truck another month. Maybe fix that clutch, maybe eat something better than gas station jerky. He signed nothing, took the keys, and walked out. Outside, the sun hit him like a hammer. He climbed into his rig, the Peterbilt groaning awake like an old soldier. Behind the yard, a single steel container waited, dark gray, marked 42 in fading white paint. The number sent a strange chill through him. He'd seen that numbering style before, back when he worked for Harper Freight, the company that went bankrupt after a scandal involving lost shipments. But that was years ago. He shook it off. A man in a dusty vest was already there with a forklift. "Load's sealed," he said. "You don't need to check it. Better not, actually." Ray forced a laugh. "Yeah, that's what they all say." The man didn't laugh back. When the container clicked into place on the flatbed, the forklift driver handed him a small envelope. Inside, a map, handwritten directions, and a wad of cash. No invoice, no signature. Just a route drawn in red ink, and 3 words scrawled at the bottom. No stops, no questions. Ray stuffed the envelope into his jacket and pulled onto the highway. The sun was sinking, melting into the horizon like a dying ember. His mirrors caught the shimmer of desert heat. The road ahead empty, except for the long shadow of his truck stretching toward Texas. Hours passed. Miles disappeared. The hum of tires was hypnotic. But somewhere behind him, deep in the trailer, something shifted. A dull thud. Ray frowned. Probably just the cargo settling. Happens all the time. He turned up the radio, an old country station cracking through static. But as the night deepened, he couldn't shake the feeling that something in the back of his rig was alive. He drove on anyway. By mid-morning, the light went white and mean. West Texas unrolled like a scorched scroll. Mesquite scratching at the wind, windmills ticking like old clocks nobody wound on purpose. Heat shivered off the hood of the Peterbilt, turned the road ahead into a river of quicksilver. Ray let the engine drone under him, a steady baritone that said, "Keep moving, keep breathing, keep not thinking about the envelope of cash tucked inside the glove box and the way the red ink on the map looked almost like dried blood." He had left the El Paso sprawl behind before dawn, the freeway empty except for a few tankers and a sheriff's cruiser that idled on the median like a bored predator. Now the truck shouldered its way through desert emptiness. Dust devils crossed in front of him, skinny ghosts flexing and dissolving. Finally, the radio pulled in a station clear enough to hold. Cattle prices, a weather warning about dry lightning, a voice between commercials that had the lonely cheerfulness of a Denny's waitress at 3 in the morning. Ray drank coffee that tasted like a steel thermos. He worked his jaw, trying to chase away the tightness that had settled there since the yard. Container 42. He told himself the number meant nothing. A coincidence. The world was full of coincidences. Most of them just looked like patterns when you were tired. The first sound came just after high noon, a shallow clunk that traveled up the frame and into his bones. The truck handled fine. The gauges were shy of angry. He watched the mirrors anyway, both of them a repeated rectangle of sky, road, and the gray box riding his flatbed. Nothing moved. Nothing ever moved in a mirror until it was too late. Straps settling, he told himself, wood pallets shifting. He had hauled everything from onions to oxygen tanks. Cargo liked to gossip with the road, and it spoke in thuds and creaks and sighs. That was normal. That was explainable. Ray reached to turn the radio louder. The second sound arrived with the heat's crescendo. A faint rasp, there and gone, like a mouse skittering across a stovetop. He felt it more than heard it, a suggestion along the spine. He tightened his hands on the wheel until the tendons showed like ropes. By early afternoon, he rolled into a truck stop outside Fort Stockton, one of those sprawling asphalt colonies where diesel rigs slept in rows like cattle. The sign promised showers, barbecue, lottery tickets, and a slot machine that was always broken. He needed fuel and water and the calm that comes from looking at other people's faces for a few minutes. The red ink on the map had said no stops, but the route also asked for a driver who could keep his hands steady and his eyes open. For that, he needed a few human minutes. Ray eased into a lane, shut down the engine, and felt the silence hit like altitude. The air outside tasted like hot pennies. He walked the length of the trailer, hand-testing ratchet straps as he went. The metal of the container radiated a dry, oven heat. He stood near the rear doors, listening. Nothing. Not the hush of shifting freight. Not a mouse. Not a breath. Just nerves, he said. too softly for the word to sound like anything but a wish. Inside the store, air conditioning smelled like lemon cleaner and popcorn salt. A handful of tourists in sunburnt shorts stared at racks of souvenir shot glasses shaped like cowboy boots. A woman at the counter rang up energy drinks with the bored holiness of a parish priest. Ray kept his hat low, grabbed a gallon of water and a bag of beef jerky he would probably gnaw without tasting, and drifted toward the coffee pots. "Afternoon, sir," a voice said, too bright. "Where you headed?" He turned and saw a young cop, Texas Department of Public Safety by the patch, standing beside the ice chest. The kid had that fresh academy look, a haircut that could cut paper, a smile that was learning where to live on his face. His hat brim was spotless. His boots had never met a ditch. "Austin," Ray said. He kept his tone neutral, the way you speak to dogs you don't know. "Big industrial park east side." "Long pull," the officer said. "Hot one, too." He flicked a thumbnail against the corner of his ticket book, like a man testing a lighter that didn't belong to him. "We got a way station east past town. A lot of folks skipping it today. Not you, I'm sure." Ray sipped burnt coffee and tried to place the kid's angle. Friendly chat or fishing expedition? "I keep my axle weight honest," he said. "Helps the tires live." "That Peterbilt yours?" the kid asked. "Looks like an older model." "Older than my patience," Ray said, tipping a half smile. "Treats me fair when I treat it fair." The kid laughed too quickly, then watched Ray in the polished chrome of the soda fountain. "We're seeing some interesting loads come through," he said. "You'd be surprised what people hide under a tarp." "I don't tarp," Ray said. "I bolt down steel and keep it square." "Mind if I ask what you're hauling?" Ray glanced toward the window, where heat made the asphalt ripple and the outline of his trailer grew soft around the edges like a mirage. The 3 words at the bottom of the map walked through his mind again. No stops, no questions. "Generators," he lied, easy as breathing. "Hurricane season backlogs deliveries. Company in Austin wants them yesterday." The kid nodded with the solemnity of someone who understands neither hurricanes nor yesterday. "We appreciate drivers keeping the supply chain rolling," he said, and Ray could hear the capital letters. "Safe travels, sir." "Appreciate you," Ray said, and paid for his things. He left $2 on the counter out of habit, then remembered that tipping cashiers wasn't a thing here and put the bills back into his pocket, suddenly superstitious. Outside, the heat pressed both palms against his chest. He walked the rig again, slower this time. The back doors wore a thick brass seal the yard had affixed. It looked legitimate in that heavy, arcane way of freight hardware. He crouched and listened. Air vibrated with highway noise, compressors cycling, a kid laughing near the slushy machine. From the container came nothing. No scrape, no small voice, no proof that his imagination hadn't packed itself into his cab. He climbed back in, fired the engine, and rolled out. The way station east of town sat sun-bleached and open. A digital sign flashed closed in green letters. The kid hadn't been fishing for that. He had been feeling out a man's heartbeat for no reason except boredom and a job requirement. Ray felt bad for disliking him. The world made you suspicious, then punished you for it. The road narrowed into 2 lanes before widening again, a ribbon stitched across scrub and limestone. A hawk hung on a hot draft over the median, the geometry of its wings so sure that Ray felt his own bones ache to match it. He drank water and thought about Austin's humid air, about the warehouses east of the airport where metal sounded different because moisture lived in it. He thought about the man in mirrored shades and the forklift operator who wouldn't laugh. He thought about the number painted on the container like a dare. The third sound came when the sun slanted toward late afternoon, after he had put another handful of miles behind him and convinced himself of ordinary explanations. It began as a soft, deliberate scuffing, as if something inside were learning the rhythm of his gears, waiting between downshifts to move. Ray shut off the radio. The silence around the rasp grew bigger than the desert, as if the truck had become a church nave, and the sound was a communion bell. He tried the oldest trick in the book. He ignored it. He let the Peterbilt gather speed on a gentle grade, humming steady, heartbeat even. The noise went away. For a blessed minute, it went away. Then, just when he had allowed the normal world back in, a flagged-off construction zone, a buzzard pecking at a flattened armadillo, a billboard promising salvation and smoked brisket. The scuff returned, accompanied by a quiet, accidental thud, no louder than a knuckle against a desk. This time, it wasn't the container talking to the road. It was the road reminding him the container could talk back. Ray took the next exit, a county road that ran past a shuttered feed store and a church with a hand-painted sign. He pulled onto the shoulder where the ground bled from gravel into short, stubborn grass. Killed the engine. The heat swarmed him as he dropped to the ground. Easy, he told himself, walking to the back. You're a professional. You check the hardware. You keep moving. The brass seal was intact. The hinges wore fine dust, but no fresh scratches. He pressed his ear to the door. The metal burned, a good, honest pain. He held there anyway, muffling his own breath, listening for the ghost he had brought with him from El Paso. At first, there was only the blood in his head. Then, under it, something faint, a whisper of cloth, the gentlest slide of something against the interior wall. A pause, and then he swore it, a breath. Ray jerked back as if he had been stung. The world outside stayed exactly the same. Flies stitching the air, a cicada drilling its one idea into the heat, a distant semi heaving itself east. He walked around the container, hand on the steel like a man checking the flank of a horse. Nothing. Whoever, whatever, had learned stillness. He could call the number on the scrap of paper the dispatcher had pushed across the desk. He could report a noise and watch how quickly the job got reassigned, or how quickly a second truck showed up with men who wore gloves even in summer. He could drive to the nearest sheriff's office and put it in their hands, let the state cut the seal, and write up official words that absolved him. He climbed back into the cab instead. His ailing clutch sighed as he put the truck in gear. He rejoined the highway with the slow, deliberate grace of a man carrying an invisible glass of water he refused to spill. The sun slid lower. Shadows lengthened until the mesquite looked like ink strokes on the desert's pale page. Dusk gathered like a rumor. The horizon turned bruise purple. A train ran parallel for a few minutes, iron on iron scribbling a private code. Ray tried the radio again and stumbled onto a preacher who sounded frankly exhausted by damnation. He clicked the volume down until the sermon was a murmur, the human equivalent of a nightlight. By the time the interstate lights thinned and the stars came on, Ray felt the road inside him as much as beneath him. Fatigue tugged the corners of everything. He told himself he would push another hour, then one more, then find a lot with showers and a line of rigs that said, "You're not alone, even when you are." Fort Stockton had another stop north of town. Quieter, nothing fancy. He pictured the rows of trucks easing their engines into rest like men unbuckling belts after a long day. He pictured himself sleeping hard, without dreams. Behind him, from inside the gray box, came a single, careful tap. Not a plea, a test. Ray didn't look in the mirror. He kept his hands steady and his eyes forward, the desert slipping into night around him like a ceremonial robe. The map in the glove box shed its quiet ink glow into his thoughts. No stops, it had said. No questions. He drove on, into the dark that was about to get a name. The Fort Stockton rest stop shimmered under the sodium lights, like a ship moored in a sea of asphalt. Rows of semis idled side by side, engines breathing slow and deep, their running lights blinking in sleepy Morse code. Somewhere, a dog barked once and gave up. The desert air had cooled just enough to let a man think he could breathe again. Ray eased the Peterbilt into a slot at the edge of the lot, far from the diner's hum and the low chatter of other drivers swapping stories that ended in laughter or lies. He killed the engine. The sudden quiet felt enormous, a cathedral of wind and crickets. He climbed down, stretched until his back popped, and checked his phone. No service. Not unusual this far west. He locked the cab, walked toward the building for coffee and a stale sandwich, and tried not to look at the gray container sitting under the orange glow of the lamp. By the time he came back, the moon had risen low and fat, lighting the metal box in cold silver. He stood for a moment, paper cup steaming in his hand, and listened. Nothing but the hum of transformers and the hiss of air brakes from somewhere across the lot. See? All in your head, he muttered. Just freight doing freight things. He climbed into the cab, shut the door, and let the air settle. The bench seat creaked, the dashboard crackled with the expansion of cooling plastic. He ate half the sandwich and tossed the rest onto the passenger floor. The caffeine hit late, his heartbeat falling into rhythm with the ticking of the dash clock. At 1 a.m, he counted the ticks. Something brushed the wall of the trailer. Not a thud, not the wooden roll of cargo shifting. Softer, intentional, like fingernails across steel. Ray froze. The sound came again. 3 slow scratches, a pause, then 2 quick ones, as if whoever or whatever was inside was learning how to get his attention. He reached instinctively for the glove box, where the .45 Colt rested in its worn leather holster. The habit came from another life, the one with uniforms and orders and sandstorms. He laid the gun on the seat beside him and listened. A minute passed, maybe 5. Time inside the cab had its own logic. Then came the smallest tap, right at the edge of hearing. Metal on metal, deliberate. Ray's mouth went dry. Jesus, he whispered. He turned the key halfway, enough to power the external floodlight bolted to the rear of the trailer. The beam cut through the dark, pale and shaky. He climbed down, gun in hand, boots crunching gravel. Every trucker instinct told him to leave it alone, to pretend he hadn't heard a thing. But the Marine in him, trained to investigate, to secure, to know, pushed him forward. The desert wind tugged at his jacket as he rounded the trailer. The brass seal still hung intact, heavy and solid. He ran the beam of his flashlight along the edges of the doors. No scratches, no dents. The padlock hadn't moved. Then, as he leaned in closer, something shifted behind the steel. A faint shuffle, followed by the unmistakable sound of breathing. Ray stepped back, adrenaline waking every nerve. "Who's in there?" he barked. No reply, just silence that felt heavier than the air. He tapped the door with the flashlight. "You hear me? If someone's screwing around, you picked the wrong rig." And then, movement. A shadow inside, crossing behind the thin sliver between the doors. The flashlight caught something, a flash of an eye, human and terrified. Ray's stomach dropped. Holy hell. He lowered the light, heart hammering. There's someone in there. He backed away, gun still in hand, trying to think. Smugglers? Coyotes moving people across the border? He'd heard stories. Drivers who opened the wrong trailer and found a dozen souls stuffed inside, all gasping for air. But this wasn't a border run, and whoever gave him this job had paid too well for a simple smuggling gig. He looked around the lot. No one watching. A few rigs idled with curtains drawn. The gas station light buzzed and flickered. The whisper came again, desperate this time. A faint voice from behind the door. "Help, please." Ray froze. The words sliced through him, small but clear. He took a step forward, then stopped himself. He couldn't open it. If he broke the seal, he was done. No pay, maybe worse. People who paid cash for silence didn't forgive broken rules. He whispered through the metal. "Who are you?" Silence. Then, barely audible, "Don't let them take us back." Ray's throat went tight. The voice was young, trembling, too human to ignore. But before he could respond, headlights swept across the lot. A black pickup slowed near his rig, idled for a few seconds, and then rolled on. Its windows were tinted, plates missing. Ray ducked behind the truck's fender, watching the taillights fade into the desert road. Who the hell were these people? When the night went still again, he pressed his palm against the container. The steel pulsed faintly with warmth. Inside, he thought he heard movement, 2, maybe 3 people shifting, whispering. He lowered the gun, exhaustion and dread mixing into something numb. Back in the cab, he sat with the engine off and the floodlight casting long shadows over the lot. He couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that single eye staring back at him through the crack, frightened, pleading, human. The clock ticked past 3. He rubbed his face and muttered, "You just keep driving, Ray. You didn't see a damn thing." Outside, the desert wind moaned through the trailers. The sound was almost a voice. When dawn finally scraped a pale light across the sky, Ray was still awake, staring at the container in his mirror, wondering what the hell he was really hauling, and what waited for him in Austin. The sun was already climbing when Ray finally gave up on the idea of sleep. His eyes burned, and every bone in his body felt like it had been run through a grinder. He splashed bottled water on his face and stared at his reflection in the side mirror. Gray stubble, cracked lips, eyes too sharp for a man who was supposed to be half asleep at a truck stop. "Just another day," he told the mirror, voice hoarse. "You haul the freight, you get paid, you keep breathing." He fired up the Peterbilt, the diesel coughing awake like an old smoker. The rest of the lot was stirring too. Doors slamming, engines rumbling, a chorus of mechanical yawns. He checked the brass seal again before rolling out. Still unbroken, still gleaming in the morning light. For a moment, he convinced himself that the whole thing, the scratching, the voice, the eye, was a hallucination brought on by too much caffeine and too little sleep. The desert slid by in pale gold bands. Hours passed, maybe more. The highway curved east, toward the low hills beyond Marathon. The landscape changed subtly, from dust to scrub, from brown to something like green. He found the rhythm again. Engine, tires, wind, thought. The truck was his heartbeat. The road was his pulse. Then, somewhere between one heartbeat and the next, everything went wrong. A metallic clank cut through the hum of the tires. Then another, sharper, angrier. Ray glanced at the mirrors. The rear latch was shaking like something inside was hitting it from within. "What the hell?" he muttered. The container jolted. Once. Twice. Then the entire rig lurched as if kicked by a giant. The Peterbilt swerved, Ray fought the wheel, muscles screaming. The sound that followed wasn't just pounding. It was frenzy. Someone was trying to break out. God damn it! He downshifted, pulling onto the gravel shoulder. The truck shuddered to a stop, dust boiling up around him. He jumped out before the wheels had fully stilled, heart slamming against his ribs. The padlock on the doors, the one that had gleamed untouched that morning, now hung twisted, half broken. The metal was bent outward, the hinge warped. "Don't do this," he whispered, as if the words could reach whoever was inside. Too late. The door burst open. A blur of motion hit the light. A man, thin, filthy, dressed in what looked like an orange prison jumpsuit torn at the knees. He stumbled out, blinking against the sun, then dropped to his knees, gasping. Another followed, dark-haired and younger, carrying a third man whose face was gray with pain and sweat. The injured one had blood crusted along his shoulder. For a heartbeat, the three of them stood frozen, framed in the glare of the Texas morning and the dust swirling around them. Then the first man looked up at Ray. He didn't run. He didn't threaten. He raised his hands, palms open, eyes wild but pleading. "Please," he said. His voice cracked. "Please don't call the cops." Ray lifted his pistol before he even thought about it, instincts firing from years of training. "Stay where you are." The second man flinched, but didn't move. "We're not here to hurt you," he said, accent thick, voice low. "We just need help." "You broke out of my truck," Ray barked. "You tell me what the hell you're doing in there before I—" The first man cut him off, shaking his head violently. "We didn't choose to be there. They locked us in. Please, listen." The injured one groaned, sagging against the other's shoulder. Blood dripped onto the dirt in dark spots. Ray's hand trembled, but he didn't lower the gun. "Locked you in? Who's they?" "The company," said the younger man, breath ragged. "The people who run the camps. They use prisoners, immigrants. They say it's work release, but it's not. It's slavery." Ray stared at them, words dying in his throat. The first man, the one who'd spoken first, took a cautious step forward. "We escaped. We saw things. They were going to kill us." "Where?" Ray demanded. "Outside Odessa. A private facility. No name on the gate, just numbers. They said we were working for a construction company, building housing units. But they kept people there, beat them, chained them." His voice cracked again. "You were delivering us back." The words hit Ray like a punch to the gut. He looked back at the gray container. The number 42 painted on the side glared in the sunlight. Memories surfaced. Old jobs for Harper Freight, strange deliveries, sealed containers marked with the same stencil. And the rumors about drivers who disappeared, migrants who never reached their destination. He'd brushed them off. Everyone did. You didn't ask questions in logistics. You kept the wheels turning. The injured man coughed, blood flecking his lips. "Please," he whispered. "We can't go back." Ray's throat tightened. He looked down the highway, empty in both directions. The desert shimmered, endless and uncaring. Somewhere far off, a hawk circled. He holstered the gun slowly. "Get in the cab," he said. The younger man blinked. "What?" "Get in," Ray repeated. "All of you, before someone drives by and decides to call the sheriff." They hesitated, disbelief flickering across their faces, then moved fast. The younger one helped the wounded man climb onto the passenger side, while the first man, tall, lean, eyes full of exhaustion, stood for a moment by the open doors of the container, staring inside like it was a grave. Ray followed his gaze. Chains bolted to the floor, an empty water jug, a strip of duct tape with dark stains. He swallowed hard. You said there were more of you. There were, the man said softly. Not anymore. They shut the doors together, the lock hanging twisted and useless. As Ray pulled back onto the highway, the three strangers sat silent in the cab. The road stretched ahead, endless and bright. But something had shifted inside him, like the gears of a machine that had been running the wrong way for years. He didn't know who these people were. He didn't know what kind of hell they'd crawled out of. But he knew one thing. Whatever he'd been hired to deliver, it wasn't just cargo. He glanced in the mirror. The container glared back at him, dull and silent. For the first time, Ray wished he'd never taken this job. The first man spoke quietly, almost to himself. We need to get to Austin. There's someone there who can help. Ray didn't ask who, not yet. He just pressed the accelerator and drove east, toward a city that suddenly felt very far away. They rode east with the morning sun pooling in the windshield, the road a bright ribbon and everything else a noise Ray couldn't quite push out of his head. The two who could still sit upright wedged themselves on the passenger bench. The wounded ones stretched half across their knees, breathing in short, bitten-off gasps. The cab smelled like sweat, iron, and desert dust. Names, Ray said at last, voice low enough not to spook the moment. If I'm driving you anywhere, I need names. The tall one glanced over, jaw tight. I'm Luis Ortega, he said. This is Mateo. The hurt one's Darnell. He paused and then added, we didn't pick the orange clothes. Up close, the jumpsuits were scuffed and stained. The institutional orange faded to the chalky color of a warning that had been ignored too long. Mateo, maybe mid-20s, quick eyes, a kindness that showed up even under fear, pressed a rag against Darnell's shoulder. Blood had bled through drier lint gray. Ray nodded once. Ray Harper, he said, like the truth might matter later. Former Marine, now I haul freight, usually the kind they write down on paper. Luis let out a breath that had shape to it. We're not trying to make this your problem, he said, but it already is. Tell me, Ray said. He didn't look at them. He kept his eyes on the asphalt, the way a man watches surf when he knows a rip current is near. Luis started, stopped, glanced at Darnell, then began again. They call it work release, he said. A private outfit north of Odessa. No sign on the gate, just a number stenciled on concrete. They take inmates and undocumented guys awaiting hearings. Say we're earning credits on construction contracts. We pour slabs, run rebar, throw up walls. Cheap labor for projects that go up faster than permits can keep up. He swallowed. They say it's legal, but they own the schedule. They own the water. They own who gets to call home. Mateo's voice was soft. They own the night. How'd you end up there? Ray asked. Luis looked like a man choosing which tooth to pull first. I caught a probation violation out of Midland, he said. Missed a meeting when my mom got sick. They snatched me into a transport van with a handful of guys who didn't even speak the charges against them. We thought we were headed to county. We went to that gate instead. And Darnell? Parolee, Mateo said. Picked up on a curfew violation. He talked back when they kept him past midnight shift change. Guard cracked him with a baton. He fell on rebar. Could have killed him. They kept him working anyway. Darnell stirred, eyes fluttering behind lids the color of bruised fruit. Didn't shut up, he mumbled, a ghost of a grin trolling his mouth. Shoulda shut up. Ray's grip tightened on the wheel. The Peterbilt's engine droned, steady as a metronome. He felt the old training sit up in him. Triage, Perimeter, mission first, mission clear. But the mission had been to deliver a sealed container and ask no questions. Now the mission was to look at a man bleeding in orange and pretend he didn't see him. He couldn't do the second thing and still sit in his own skin. "Who runs it?" he asked. "You got a name?" Luis shook his head. The people we saw wore contractor polos with a made-up company name that changed every month. Security had black trucks with no plates. The guy in charge went by Keller when he spoke to us. Luis looked out the window. Could be a fake. Ray felt a cold that had nothing to do with air conditioning slip down his back. Keller. The office in El Paso had been Keller Transport Solutions. He could still see the mirrored sunglasses inside, see the ink-faded map with the red route and the 3 words at the bottom. "What happened last night?" he asked. "Why now?" Mateo worked at Darnell's shoulder with a steady hand, making a pad from one of Ray's shop towels. "A guy tried to run at the work site," he said. "He slipped a zip tie, took off across the frame of a building, shouting he wasn't staying one more night. A guard chased him. There was—" He stopped. His breath shortened. He made himself continue. "There was a fall. The guard didn't get back up. Neither did the guy. We heard someone say to stash the bodies, call it an accident. We heard them say they had to move the volatile ones. We are the volatile ones, apparently." Luis's voice dropped. "They loaded 3 of us into a box at night, shackled to the floor. Darnell was bleeding. The lock clicked like a door in a story you don't tell kids. Then we rode." Ray swallowed. He heard himself ask, "How'd you get the lock off?" Mateo lifted a bent piece of steel, thin as a ruler and sharp at one end. "Door hinge pin. Took half the night to work it loose." He shrugged. "I used to fix bikes." Ray risked a side glance, met Mateo's eyes, and saw the calm of men who had already had the worst day of their lives and were surprised to find themselves still moving through time. "And Austin?" Ray asked. "Why there?" "A reporter," Luis said. "A woman named Ava McKenna. She's been calling the camps, trying to talk to workers' families. She left a voicemail on a borrowed phone. Said if anyone could get out, she'd meet them. We have something she needs." He tapped the front of his jumpsuit where it gaped open. A chip. A memory card from a site camera. One of the day laborers slipped it to us after the fall. Said he couldn't risk holding it. He heard Ava's name from a church group and wrote it on cardboard so we wouldn't forget. He gave a brittle smile. Hard to forget a name when it sounds like a way out. Ray drove in silence for a while. Wakening Town slid past. Spoiled milk smell from a dairy, a pawn sign that promised instant cash and delivered disappointment. A school marquee begging for bus drivers. A billboard offered salvation and smoked meat in the same sentence. "If the reporter's legit," Ray said, "you hand her your card and pray you live to testify. If she's not, she's legit," Mateo said. "We checked a library computer when we were out on a work detail. She writes for the Austin Sentinel. She did a series on contractors who misused disaster grants. Made a few enemies." Ray blew out a breath, thinking about enemies that wore sunglasses indoors and spoke in cash. "You got a number?" "Written on memory," Luis said. "We don't call. Too easy to trace. A friend can get word to her if we reach the city." "And the destination they gave me?" Ray asked. "Industrial Park, east of Austin." Luis's pause was answer enough. "They were sending you back to the chain," Ray said, not asking. "Or to some place that makes the chain tighter." Mateo's jaw set in a way that meant he wasn't going to cry until later. "We thought we were done with chains," he said. Darnell stirred again. The pain had edged his voice into a whisper. "Water," he said. Ray handed back a bottle, watched Mateo tip it slow, saw some of it make the trip from lip to throat. He eased the truck off at a county road that ran past a caved-in barn and a defunct feed shop. 2 miles down, he found a pull-out where mesquite made a thin privacy screen. He killed the engine. The sudden quiet felt like a headstone. "Let's see the wound," he said, sliding from behind the wheel. They worked in the dust with the truck's shadow as their shade. Ray cut away fabric with a pocket knife he kept sharp out of habit. The gash along Darnell's shoulder was ugly, a jagged tear where bone had nearly introduced itself to daylight. The flesh around it was inflamed, hot under Ray's fingers. "We need a clinic," Mateo said. "We need not to be seen," Luis answered, eyes scanning the shimmering road, the empty horizon that felt less empty by the second. Ray found the first aid kit under the seat. Gauze, antiseptic, tape, a packet of expired painkillers he decided not to mention. "I can clean it," he said. "I can tape it so he doesn't rip it worse. But if infection sets in..." He let the sentence hang where it could do the least harm. He poured antiseptic onto the wound. Darnell bit down on the edge of his sleeve and hissed, a sound that made Ray see sand and blood and a long-ago tent where a medic kept saying, "You're fine, Marine, you're fine," like words could cauterize. "Breathe," Ray said. "In, out. Count if you have to." Darnell actually counted, soft as prayer. 1, 2, 3, he murmured, and a tear slid clean down his cheek, leaving a track through the dirt. Ray taped the gauze down, palm instinctively steady. "That'll hold you a stretch," he said, "but you're running on luck and grit." Darnell let out a ragged laugh. "I got grit," he said. "Luck's the problem." They got him settled back into the cab. The heat pressed close, the kind that made men short-tempered and honest. Ray stood outside the open door, hand on the frame, looking at them like a man deciding whether to lift a weight that might crush him. "Here's the choice," he said. "I can drop you near a bus station, pretend I never saw you, and you can roll your dice. Or I can take you into Austin, put my own name on whatever happens, and you can hand that card to the reporter. If I do the second thing, I'm not turning back, and if anyone follows, I'm not stopping. You understand me?" Luis's eyes lifted. They were tired, but they were steady. "We don't need you to save us," he said. "We need a ride to the truth." Mateo reached into the inside seam of his jumpsuit, the place where fabric doubled and hands searched only if they were curious. He slipped out a tiny plastic square wrapped in tape and paper. He held it like a sparrow. "You get us there," he said. "This doesn't disappear in a ditch. It prints on the front page." Ray looked from the card to their faces, to the horizon where heat quivered like a warning. He thought about bank calls and overdue notices, about the man with mirrored shades who had said the cargo didn't like daylight, about the number 42 painted on steel like someone's private joke. He thought about nights in a desert an ocean away, when he'd followed orders because that's what men like him did, and how sometimes he woke up with the taste of those orders in his mouth. "All right," he said, voice gone quiet in the Texas morning. "Austin it is." He climbed back behind the wheel, felt the Peterbilt's familiar rattle come up through the pedals like an old dog nudging his shin. He pulled onto the county road and then the highway, merging east into the wide stream of America. For a few long minutes, nobody spoke. Mile markers, numbers turned into words in his head like a school lesson, clicked past. The asphalt heat softened to something breathable. A cloud grew on the horizon and then changed its mind. Ray let the truck find its gear and stay there. Just so you know, Luis said at last. They'll come looking. They got eyes at truck stops and way stations and backlots. They don't file police reports. They file invoices. Ray nodded once. Had a visitor last night, he said. Black pickup rolled through without plates. Took a look and kept moving. Could be nothing. Could be everything. Then it started already, Mateo said. Ray checked his side mirror. For now, only sky, road, and the gray box that had become a courtroom. He felt the shape of the decision settle in him, heavy and true, the way a load settles when you tighten the straps and know they won't let go. Here's how we'll run it, he said, slipping back into the voice that had moved men under fire. We stick to Interstate 10 for a stretch, then slide north where I know a back highway. We keep stops short and eyes open. If you see a black Ford in the glass, you tell me before fear tells you. We don't talk to anyone who wants to help too quick. We don't buy luck we didn't earn. Luis cracked a real smile, small and surprised. Yes, sir, he said, then caught himself. Sorry. Habit. You sound like somebody who's had to make plans that didn't like him. Ray kept his gaze forward. Plans rarely like anybody. People do if you're lucky. Darnell's voice drifted from the bench like a radio turned low. If we live, he said. I'm getting pancakes, like a stack you can't see over. You'll see over it, Mateo said. I'll make you. Ray almost laughed. The sound felt strange in his chest, like a drawer that hadn't been opened in years but still slid smooth. He pictured a diner in Austin, griddle hissing, the clatter of plates, a waitress calling everybody honey. He pictured a woman named Ava who had made enough enemies to be worth meeting. The highway unspooled, patient and long. Somewhere far behind, something might have turned its head toward them. The sound of a truck, the scent of a choice. Ahead, Austin lay like a promise you weren't sure you believed in, but couldn't stop walking toward. Ray reached to the glove box, pulled out the envelope with the cash and the red-lined map, and fed the map into the narrow mouth of the dash trash slot. The crinkled paper made a dry, papery sigh as it disappeared. New route, he said, more to himself than to the men in orange. New job. He settled his hands at 10 and 2. Old habits didn't ask permission. And let the Peterbilt carry all of them east, toward a city where names were going to matter and silence wasn't part of the pay. Behind them, in the hot hollow of the trailer, the steel walls rattled, then went still, as if the cargo understood it had changed. By the time the sun fell behind the low hills, they were deep in West Texas again. A land of wind farms and faded motels, of roads that ran so straight they made you question distance itself. The highway stretched like an artery cut through sand and scrub. The Peterbilt hummed steady, its headlights carving 2 clean tunnels through the dusk. Luis and Mateo had dozed off, one on either side of Darnell, whose head lolled against the window. The wounded man slept shallow, his breathing uneven. Ray kept checking the mirror, the rhythm of his eyes switching between glass and road and glass. It had been hours since they left the county road and joined the interstate again. And still, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was out there, following. The black Ford. It had shown up twice now, once outside Fort Stockton, once more just before sunset, hanging a few cars back, then disappearing into the shimmer of heat. No plates, no decals. Just matte paint and tinted windows. He knew that look. Military discipline disguised as nothing at all. The kind of people who could make you disappear and leave no paper trail. He pressed the accelerator, letting the Peterbilt surge forward, gears grinding for a heartbeat before catching. Mateo stirred. Something wrong? Ray didn't look away from the mirror. Maybe. Luis sat up, rubbing his face. You see it? Ray nodded once. Black pickup. Been tailing us since Pecos. Silence filled the cab, heavy and immediate. Then Luis cursed softly in Spanish. They found us faster than I thought. How? Mateo whispered. They own half the road, Ray said. They got eyes everywhere. Cameras on rest stops, way stations, GPS on the freight network. Even when you run off the grid, someone's watching the dirt you leave behind. He downshifted, eyes darting to the fuel gauge. A quarter tank, not great. The nearest station was 30 miles ahead. Options? Luis asked. We don't head for a city, Ray said. Cities mean cops. Cops mean data. We go dark. Mateo frowned. How dark? Ray flipped on the CB, static crackling through the cabin. He turned the dial until he found an old, half-dead channel. Truckers swapping weather and rumors. He keyed the mic and spoke low. Breaker 19? Anybody got ears on Route 29 northbound? Got a tail, no plates, dark pickup? You seeing what I'm seeing? A long pause, then a grainy voice came through the static. Could be them border boys. Could be worse. You keep rolling, friend. That stretch eats headlights. Ray exhaled. Not much, but something. He cut the CB again. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the dry scent of dust and creosote. The road narrowed between low mesas, the air thick with the static charge that comes before a storm. Lightning flashed far ahead, thin, white veins across a bruised sky. Mateo turned toward him. You ever get tired of running? Ray kept his eyes on the road. Depends who's behind you. They drove another 10 miles in silence. Then Luis stiffened. Ray, he said quietly. In the mirror, 2 headlights bloomed. Too close, too fast. The Ford had returned, silent and smooth, hugging the median like a predator stalking prey. Hold tight, Ray muttered. The Peterbilt was heavy, but on the open road, mass could be a weapon. He downshifted hard and swung into the left lane, forcing the truck's bulk between the Ford and the shoulder. The pickup adjusted instantly, sliding to the opposite lane, matching speed. Ray saw a glint behind its windshield, a flash of reflection, maybe binoculars, or a scope. Luis grabbed the dash. They're aiming. A sound like thunder cracked behind them. The rearview mirror shattered. Glass sprayed across the cab. Down, Ray barked. The second shot hit metal, not the cab, but the container. The echo rang like a bell. Darnell groaned, half waking. What's happening? Stay down, Mateo shouted, pushing him below the window. Ray floored the accelerator. The diesel roared, gears howling as the truck climbed past 70, 80 miles per hour, too fast for a machine this size, this old. The Ford closed in, headlights flashing once, twice, then vanishing into darkness as it cut its beams. Where the hell's he gone? Luis said. Hang on, Ray muttered. He swerved right, then slammed the wheel left, forcing the trailer to fishtail. Dust exploded from the shoulder. In the side mirror, the Ford appeared again, keeping perfect distance, patient, confident. Whoever was driving wasn't new at this. Ray, what are you doing? Mateo yelled, making them work for it. He yanked the rig off the interstate, tires screaming as they hit a gravel exit ramp leading to a service road that paralleled the highway. The Peterbilt bucked like a live thing, but Ray kept it steady, every muscle in his arms flexed tight. Behind them, the Ford followed. God damn it, he said through his teeth. The storm broke over them a minute later. Rain slamming against metal, lightning igniting the horizon. The desert turned to glass, every puddle reflecting a chaos of light. Then came the next shot. A hole bloomed in the trailer's rear door, sharp and clean. Another, closer to the cab. Mateo screamed, "They're hitting the truck!" Ray shouted back, "No, they're aiming for—" But before he could finish, a bullet punched through the thin metal wall of the sleeper berth. Darnell jerked, his body twisting violently. Mateo caught him, but his hands came away red. "Darnell! No, no, no!" Ray's throat closed. The sound of gunfire and rain blurred into one long scream of metal and wind. He gritted his teeth, eyes on the storm ahead. The highway vanished in sheets of water. He saw an old service sign, barely legible in the flash of lightning. Old County 14, dead end. Perfect. He turned the wheel and took the exit at full speed. The truck slammed through mud and standing water, tires spitting gravel like shrapnel. The Ford hesitated for half a second, then followed. The narrow road twisted between black rock outcroppings. Lightning strobed, turning the world into snapshots. The Ford's grill inches behind, Luis clutching the dash, Mateo holding Darnell's bleeding body. Ray's eyes darted to the side. A narrow canyon cut, barely wide enough for the rig, a dry riverbed. "Hold on," he shouted. He yanked the wheel and took the Peterbilt off the road. The truck plunged into the wash, mud spraying, suspension screaming. The Ford followed, headlights bouncing wildly. A flash of lightning illuminated everything. The wet rock, the dust plume, the glint of steel. Then Ray saw it. An old wooden bridge ahead, half collapsed, hanging over a gully. He floored it. The Peterbilt hit the bridge at 60 miles an hour. The wood groaned, splintered, but somehow held long enough for the front tires to clear. Behind him, the Ford tried to follow, but the bridge finally gave. The rear end buckled, the planks snapping under the weight. The pickup dropped halfway through, suspended for a heartbeat, then disappeared into the ravine. Silence. Only rain and the ticking of the cooling engine. Ray sat there, chest heaving, the smell of burnt rubber and adrenaline thick in the cab. Luis finally spoke. "He's gone." Ray nodded slowly. "For now." Mateo's voice was trembling. Darnell's hit bad. Ray turned. Darnell's breathing was shallow, blood blooming through the makeshift bandage. His eyes fluttered, unfocused. Ray reached over, pressing his hand to the wound. "Stay with me, buddy." Darnell's lips moved. You keep driving, Marine. Don't stop for me." Ray felt the words like a knife. Outside, thunder rolled, echoing through the canyon. He looked up at the cracked windshield, rain streaming down like tears. They had survived the chase, but somewhere behind them, that black Ford would climb out of the ravine. And when it did, it would come back with friends. He pressed his foot to the pedal. "We keep moving." The Peterbilt roared back to life, the storm swallowing them whole. The storm loosening its grip felt less like mercy than a pause between punches. Rain tapered to a hard mist, lightning flickered farther off, and the sky over West Texas turned the dying purple of a bruise. Ray kept the Peterbilt in the dry riverbed until the wash widened into a sandy fan, then eased the rig back onto a rutted service road that paralleled the interstate like a forgotten sentence. They drove in silence. The only sounds were the engine's steady growl and Darnell's ragged breaths. Mateo kept pressure on the wound with both hands and all his hope. Luis stared out at the dark horizon as if he could will it to keep its distance. Ray spotted it first. An old gas station the highway had abandoned years ago. The sign was a hollow rectangle, its letters long since stripped by wind and sun. A single canopy leaned like a drunk over two dead pumps. The cinder-block building behind them wore boards across its windows and a sun-bleached mural of a jackrabbit. Weeds had taken the lot back stitch by stitch, but the overhang would break the wind, and the shadows would hide a truck from casual eyes. He pulled in slow. The Peterbilt's headlights made the pump island lurch out of the dark, then framed the cinder-block walls in a weak, theatrical glow. He killed the engine, and the sudden hush rang. "We need light," Mateo said, breath tight. "We need cover," Luis countered. "Both," Ray said, opening his door. "No interior lamps. We don't advertise." They moved like a crew born in the last hour. Mateo and Luis eased Darnell across the bench and out of the cab. Ray guided them under the canopy's edge, where the rain fell in slanted threads, then settled him on a folded blanket Ray kept behind the seat. He snapped on a narrow beam flashlight, pinched the circle of light to the wound, and worked with clean hands and bad options. "Bullets do two kinds of damage," he said aloud, partly to steady himself. "The hole in and the hole out. You can bleed to death from either. This one tunneled shallow, tore meat and pride. Might have missed the big lines. We keep him warm, keep it tight, keep moving." Mateo nodded, jaw clenched. Darnell watched the canopy with glassy eyes, as if the sky had something to tell only him. "Pancakes," he muttered. "A stack you can't see over." "You'll see over it," Mateo said, and somehow made the promise sound like a fact. The wind blew a loose shutter against the storefront with a hollow clap. Ray looked toward the trailer, the gray box hulking in the dark like a sleeping animal. The Ford was out there somewhere, or its brothers were, the way a story has relatives you don't meet until the end. But the time for pretending had ended back on the interstate. He needed the truth as much as the two men watching him did. "I'm opening it," he said. Luis's head snapped around. "Are you sure?" "No," Ray said. "But I'm done being blind." He walked to the back of the rig with a flashlight and an iron bar he used for stuck latches. The brass seal had been mangled by the breakout. It hung crooked and useless. He slipped the bar under the locking cam and levered. The door complained, then relented with a groan. Cold, damp air breathed out of the container, carrying the stale scent of metal, old sweat, and something like mildew and fear. Ray lifted the light and stepped into the mouth of the box. It swallowed the beam, and then, slowly, returned the shape of itself. Steel ribs, a diamond plate floor, the pale shimmer of scuffed paint. In the corners, water had found a way, collected in tired puddles. He widened the beam. Chains, 4 of them, bolted in pairs to the floor, rings bright where wrist metal had polished them. Next to each ring, a scrap of duct tape, the adhesive darkened with grime and the brown script no one needed a lab to name. One chain still held a cut zip tie, the plastic chewed in a telltale angle by someone with patience and desperation. Along the left wall, black marker numbers had been written and half scrubbed away. Names reduced to numerals, tallied and reassigned. Under the numbers, a line of small hash marks, counted up to a week and then started again. A rhythm of captivity disguised as math. Caged among the marks, a prayer in Spanish that asked for a mother's forgiveness and a night without dogs. Ray let the light find other things. A plastic water jug, bone dry. A pile of wool blankets that smelled of ammonia. A bucket with a lid that had failed its job more than once. A crumpled kiosk receipt from a truck stop near Odessa, dated in words, and crossed out with a heavy line of ink. Somebody had wiped a handprint on the wall while bleeding more than they could afford to lose. He kept the beam steady, but his hand shook. The container had started as a question. It had become an answer with teeth. "Ray." Luis's voice floated from the canopy, thin, careful. "Come look," he said. They came. Mateo stood in the doorway, eyes wide but clear. Luis stepped inside, past him, and stopped with the slow collapse of a man who finds something he hoped he was wrong about. "Dios," he whispered, touching the wall where the numbers were. He traced the prayer with a careful fingertip and swallowed. They're not even ashamed enough to hide it. "They don't need shame," Ray said. "They have contracts." Mateo crouched by the chains, turned one ring until the cut zip tie flashed. "We rode here," he said, voice a little lost. "We rode here like freight." Ray put the light on the floor near the corner where the steel ribs met, and something winked back. A metal disc, stamped with a serial code and a logo. He pried it up with the bar. The disc was a tag, the kind used to inventory equipment in facilities that counted lives as line items. The logo was a simple K inside a circle. Not a brand he knew, but his chest knew it before his head did. "Keller," he said, as if saying it could shrink it. Luis looked up. "The man at the gate," he said. "You remember?" "I remember," Ray said. He remembered the mirrored sunglasses and the clipboard, the voice that had sounded like a man ordering himself not to care. He remembered a younger version of himself hauling sealed boxes with the same stenciled numerals for a company with his own name on the side of the truck. He remembered rumors that had sounded like nightmares until the sun came up and he needed to eat. He set the tag on his palm like a coin he would never spend, and let the anger come up like heat from the desert floor. Not the kind that makes a man stupid. The kind that gives a man a spine he can lean on. "Take photos," he said. "Whatever you can." "We don't have a phone," Luis said. "If we turn one on, we're a beacon." Ray nodded. He took out his old burner, the one he kept off and wrapped in foil for bad roads and worse customers. He powered it, watched the screen glow, then flicked the camera on and shot the chains, the numbers, the prayer, the tag. He forced his hand to be steady and his breath to be slow. When he was done, he toggled airplane mode, then shut the device down and slid it into the small lockbox bolted under the seat in the cab. "That chip you're carrying," he told Luis, "plus these. Enough to wake a newsroom." "If the newsroom wants to wake," Mateo said. He had the look of a man who had seen how many ears a truth can slide past without catching. Ray stepped back into the container, wider light now, searching. In the aft corner, half hidden under a blanket, something bulged. He kicked it free. A canvas duffel, the cheap kind they hand new inmates with a release form and a bus voucher. He unzipped it. Inside, work gloves stiff with concrete dust, a pair of safety glasses, a screwdriver with a broken tip, a folded brochure for a staffing agency that promised opportunity and always found a reason not to sign, and a spiral notebook with half its pages torn out. He thumbed the remaining pages. Names, first names only. Next to some, a date written in words, then a slash, then a city. A few had a crude star drawn by them. Beside those, nothing at all. Mateo touched one with a fingertip. "Hidalgo," he read. "San Angelo." He turned the page and flinched. "Odessa, Lubbock, Shreveport." Luis's voice wavered and then steadied. "They move people like they move drywall," he said. Ray closed the duffel and put it near the door. "We take this," he said. "We take the tag. We take the names." He hesitated. "We leave the chains where they can see them when they come to clean up. Let them understand something slipped." A faint hiss rose in the distance. Not rain, not wind. Tires on wet asphalt. Ray killed the flashlight and let darkness wrap them. The men held their breath in the way hunted things learn. Headlights slid along the far shoulder of the highway out beyond the weeds and the Eaton fence. A vehicle slowed, then sped up again, its white wash of light stuttering across the dead pumps, the boarded windows, the gray box where 3 men stood as still as bolts. When the night swallowed the light, Ray breathed. "We can't stay," he said softly. "They'll sweep the service roads. They'll check every lot with a roof and a shadow." Luis nodded. "We go." Mateo glanced at Darnell. "He needs a real doctor." "I know," Ray said. "I also know the kind of doctor that asks who brought you and why you aren't in cuffs." "The reporter?" Luis said. "Ava. She might have a way, a clinic, someone who owes her a favor." Ray stared at the container, at the truth it had finally given up. "Then we get you to her," he said. "We do it fast." They closed the doors, leaving the inside dark and the chains alone with their echoes. Ray used a ratchet strap to pull the warped latch near shut, then added 2 more crossed like a warning sign. It would not deter someone determined, but it would buy a minute from someone lazy. Sometimes a minute is a life. Back under the canopy, they lifted Darnell carefully. Ray slid into the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine came awake with the stubborn might of old machines. He looked in the mirror and saw his own eyes, colder than they had been that morning, and beyond them the faded numeral on the box, like a brand he could scrub and never not see. He pulled the burner phone back out and used it for one thing before he killed it again. He typed a name into a note. Keller. He added the letters from the tag. Then he wrote Ava McKenna and the word East. He slid the phone away. If they took him, someone needed a breadcrumb, even if no one knew where the trail began. They rolled out of the lot with the headlights off for the first few yards, then brought them up low. The Peterbilt nosed back to the service road, found a narrow cut through scrub, and returned to the highway's shoulder. Ray merged when the night allowed. Wind pushed at the rig. Somewhere far off, maybe a mile, maybe 10. Thunder grumbled like a jury that hadn't made up its mind. Darnell slept, or fell into something sleep's cousins wear. Mateo kept his palm on the bandage, feeling for heat, for a pulse. Luis watched the mirrors with a patience that had no business belonging to a man his age. Ray talked to the road in his head the way he always did when the stakes rose. "You will not betray me," he told it. "You will keep your shoulders even and your shoulders wide. You will carry this weight like it matters." He drove with a new kind of clarity, a line drawn somewhere behind his sternum. The money in the envelope had already stopped being money. The job had stopped being a job. The men in his cab weren't freight. They were witnesses and a story and a debt he owed to a version of himself he hadn't been sure was still home. "Luis," he said, not looking away from the white line sliding by. "When we hit the outskirts, you tell me how to reach Ava without ringing bells." Luis nodded. "There's a church near the river. The priest keeps his phone off and answers the door. He helped a guy after the tornadoes last year when the company tried to dock him for time off. He can get word to her." "A priest," Ray said, and the corner of his mouth twitched. "Of course." "They trust him," Mateo said, voice small and fierce. "He wears a collar. Men like Keller don't look up when a collar walks by." The highway straightened, then bowed, then straightened again. Town lights began to appear, faint as fireflies at first, then gathering in small clumps, then stretching into a thread that hinted at a city. Ray pictured the black Ford in a ravine, nose bent, men climbing out angry and wet. He pictured the same truck later under a streetlight with new plates and a new driver. He pictured more of them. He planned and replanned the route in his head. Where to leave the interstate, which arterial could give him speed and cover both, which industrial parks had dead corners and cameras with bad angles. "We make it," he said, and meant it less as prediction than as a command issued to the universe. "We get there. We hand over what we have. And if anyone stands up in our lane..." "We don't stop," Luis finished. "We don't stop," Ray said. They rolled east, the container clanking once and then going quiet like a witness who had finished testifying. The truck felt heavier and somehow easier to steer. The road kept its promises for once. The rain gave up completely and left the air clean enough to smell the wet creosote and the scared hope. Ray thought about the chains and the tally marks and the names written in pencil that would smudge if you cried on them. He let the anger sit where it gave him purpose and didn't spill. He had opened the box. He had seen the truth. Now there was only the delivery left, and for the first time since El Paso, the destination made sense. "Austin," he said under his breath, as if saying it steered the truck. "We're coming." Behind him, the highway's long sigh answered like a promise it intended to keep. The first streaks of dawn crawled across the sky like tired brushstrokes, painting the desert in cold gray. The storm had moved east during the night, but its echo still lingered in the air, that raw, metallic smell that hangs around after lightning's been too close. The Peterbilt rolled through it, tires hissing over wet asphalt, the world wrapped in mist and silence. Inside the cab, Darnell lay pale and still across the bench seat. Mateo had tied a clean strip of shirt around his shoulder and pressed a fresh dressing beneath it. But the blood had soaked through again. His breathing had turned shallow, like the sound of a man who had almost finished a sentence and wasn't sure if he'd ever get to finish it. Luis sat beside Ray, watching the horizon with eyes that didn't blink enough. The road sign they passed read, "Austin, 240 miles. To Ray, it might as well have said forever. He kept his hands at 10 and 2, the truck humming low and steady. Every few miles he checked the mirror. No black pickup, no headlights. Nothing but the gray ribbon unfurling behind them. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that the road itself was watching, like it knew something was coming. They stopped just outside Sonora at a derelict rest area, where a vending machine leaned dead against a wall. Ray killed the engine. The quiet that followed was thick enough to chew. Luis climbed out first, stretching his legs, scanning the horizon. "We can't stop long," he said. "We need fuel," Ray answered. "Water. I can siphon some diesel if I have to. But we need to patch him up or he won't make it to Austin." Mateo's voice was hoarse. "He won't make it, Ray. Look at him." Ray turned. Darnell's skin had gone waxy, his lips cracked. His eyes flicked open, unfocused, but there was still a spark behind them. "Still here," he murmured, weak but stubborn. "Ain't quittin'." Ray crouched beside him. "You hold that line, soldier. You don't quit on me, you hear?" Darnell gave a ghost of a smile. "Didn't think you liked soldiers." "Didn't think I was one anymore," Ray said quietly. Luis stepped closer. "There's a town 10 miles ahead. Junction. Small, but it's got a church." Mateo said the reporter's people used church networks. Maybe someone there can hide us long enough to find a nurse or a phone. Ray nodded. "Then that's the plan." They loaded back in. The Peterbilt coughed, then roared awake, its engine echoing across the empty lot like an oath. As the miles melted under the tires, clouds thickened again, pulling darkness back over the land. The storm had doubled back, riding the wind like a hunter retracing its trail. The first drops fell outside Junction. The town looked half asleep, a few lights flickering in diner windows, a gas station sign buzzing in protest against the wind. They rolled past a row of shuttered shops until Ray spotted the cross, a white steeple peeking above oak trees, paint peeling but still standing. He parked behind the church, out of sight from the main road. The rain came harder now, thick and heavy, rattling the metal roof of the cab. "Stay here," he told them. "I'll check inside." Luis grabbed his sleeve. "Be careful. If they find out who we are, they won't," Ray said. "I know how to look like a man asking for the wrong kind of help." He stepped out into the downpour, rain stinging his face. The church door gave under his hand, unlocked. Inside, the air smelled of old wood and candle wax. Rows of pews faced an altar draped with a faded cloth. Behind it, a door stood slightly ajar. Ray called softly, "Father?" A figure appeared, a thin man in his 60s. Gray hair slicked back, sleeves rolled to the elbows. He looked more like a mechanic than a priest. "You lost, son?" he asked, voice calm but sharp at the edges. "Not exactly," Ray said. "I've got a man bleeding out in my truck and 2 others scared half to death. I heard you help people who don't have anywhere else to go." The priest's eyes narrowed. "You running from the law?" "Worse," Ray said. "The law's the one chasing us." For a heartbeat, the man didn't move. Then he sighed, rubbing his forehead. "Bring him in the back, quick." Ray jogged back through the rain, helped Mateo carry Darnell inside. They laid him on a wooden table behind the altar. The priest disappeared through a side door and returned with a first aid kit older than the church itself. "Father Michael," he said, snapping on gloves. "Used to be a medic before God drafted me." He worked fast, cleaning, stitching, wrapping. The smell of antiseptic filled the air. Darnell gritted his teeth, eyes rolling back. "You're lucky," Father Michael said after a moment. "Bullet went clean through. Infection's your enemy now." "Can you keep him here a while?" Ray asked. "Depends who's looking for you," the priest said. "The Lord doesn't turn anyone away, but men with guns don't always ask permission." Luis stepped forward. "We need to reach a journalist in Austin, Ava McKenna. We have proof of something. A private prison, forced labor, murder. They're killing people, Father." The priest's face hardened. "I've heard whispers. A friend in San Angelo said inmates were vanishing off transport. I didn't want to believe it." "It's real," Ray said, "and they'll kill to keep it that way." Father Michael studied him, the lines on his face deepening. "There's an old landline in the office. Doesn't route through the cell network. I can make one call without anyone tracing it. Who do I tell her to meet?" Ray hesitated. "Tell her Ray Harper's coming. Tell her we've got a story worth bleeding for." The priest nodded, disappearing into the back. Thunder rolled outside, closer now, rattling the windows. Mateo knelt beside Darnell, whispering something Ray couldn't catch. Luis stood at the doorway, staring into the rain. Minutes passed before the priest returned. "Message delivered," he said. "She'll be waiting near the old freight yard on the east side tomorrow night. You'll need to move before dawn. There's a storm coming that'll slow everyone but you." Ray nodded. "Thank you, Father." The priest handed him a folded slip of paper, a map drawn in quick, confident lines. "There's a service road that runs parallel to the main highway. Use it. Stay off cameras." They carried Darnell back to the truck under the cover of rain. The priest stood by the doorway, rain dripping off his collar, eyes unreadable. "Whatever truth you've got, son," he said, "make sure the world hears it before they shut you up." Ray gave a short nod. "That's the plan." They pulled away as dawn tried and failed to break through the storm clouds. The highway wound east, lightning chasing them across the horizon. Darnell stirred once, opening his eyes just long enough to whisper, "We're close?" "Almost there," Mateo said, gripping his hand. Darnell managed a small smile. "Told you. Pancakes." Then his chest rose once more. And didn't again. The sound that followed wasn't a cry, not really. More like a sound that had run out of places to go. Mateo bowed his head, shaking. Luis pressed a hand to Darnell's chest, then covered his eyes. Ray drove. He didn't speak. Couldn't. The windshield wipers beat a rhythm that didn't fit any prayer he knew. The road ahead blurred, the lines swimming in the downpour. For miles, no one said a word. When the storm finally broke, the clouds peeled back to reveal the pale light of morning. Ray pulled to the side of the road, cut the engine, and sat there in the silence. The desert smelled clean again. He looked at Darnell's still form, then at the road east, and said quietly, "We'll get there. You'll make that delivery, one way or another." He started the truck again. The Peterbilt rumbled forward, carrying 3 men and 1 ghost into the rising sun. By late afternoon, the storm had run out of names to call them, and the sky over the hill country lightened to a hard, clean blue. The road climbed and fell in slow breaths, the scrub oak thinning, billboards multiplying, cell towers sprouting like iron weeds. Austin announced itself the way all cities do, first with radio bleed, then with traffic, then with the sudden fact of other people's errands pressing up against your own. Ray kept the Peterbilt to the right lane, speed a hair under the limit, like a man who knew he might have to hit the shoulder without warning. The industrial fringe rose ahead, low warehouses, rail spurs, the smell of hot rubber and wet cardboard. Beyond that, the skyline stood like a row of teeth, bright and a little too clean for the world they were bringing to its doorstep. Luis held the map Father Michael had sketched, folded to the size of a palm. "Freight yards east of the river," he said. "Ava said she'd wait by the chain link near the old switch house." We approached quiet. Mateo sat with Darnell's jacket folded in his lap. He'd tied it there like a seatbelt for grief. He hadn't said much since the morning broke. He looked at the skyline and then down at his hands, as if both were unreliable. Ray put them onto a service road that ran parallel to the highway like a shadow. He cut left at a dead curb, slalomed between potholes and a couch someone had given up on. Graffiti stacked on graffiti along the backs of warehouses, names in spray paint that would outlast their owners. The Peterbilt rumbled along, the gray container glaring in the mirror like a witness who'd chosen a side. At the last stop sign before the yard, everything slowed. Not time, exactly, his thinking, the way it did when rounds were about to walk the air. A black pickup nosed out of an alley and idled. It had plates this time, their presence somehow louder than their absence. Another truck waited a block down, facing them, grill angled just enough to see into their cab. A third, a dark SUV, rolled out from behind a warehouse and took up the rear. Luis saw it too. They were listening, he said, or watching the church, or both. Both, Ray said. His mouth had gone dry with the taste of an old life. "Keep your heads down when I tell you. Do not argue. We're past democracy." The pickup pulled alongside, steady as a heartbeat. The driver wore sunglasses that hid the human calculation going on behind them. He lifted a hand in a gesture that wasn't a wave and wasn't not a wave. Ray recognized the man without knowing his name. The kind who thought he'd been hired by the right team and never bothered to check the scoreboard. The passenger leaned out the window and tapped 2 fingers to the roof. Then he shouted over the diesel thrum, "You missed your turn, driver." "Yards back that way." Ray let his face go slack and mildly apologetic. the way he used to with highway patrol who wanted a reason not to write a ticket. He rolled the window down half an inch. "New to town?" he said. "Looking for Doc 4. The passenger smiled with half his mouth. "We'll escort you." Behind them, the SUV eased closer, closing the triangle. Far ahead, the second pickup began to roll, slow and inevitable, a lid coming down on a pot. Ray breathed once, in and out, and chose the shape of his last miles. He clicked the CB to life and found the dead channel again. Static hissed like frying rain. He keyed the mic low, pitched his voice for no one and whoever. "Breaker, breaker. If anybody's hauling east of the river, be advised, there's a parade on the service road. Black trucks, bad intentions. Keep clear." A voice crackled back, older than dust. "Copy that, stranger. I'll say a word on 19. Keep your nose clean." "I'll try," Ray said, and set the mic down like a prayer he'd mailed too late. He slid open the small lockbox under the dash and took out the burner phone. With his left hand on the wheel, he thumbed it awake, tapped into notes, and pulled up the photo of the chains and the tag. He added a message to the top. "Keller, Container 42, evidence in cab. Meet at East Yard Switch House. If I don't make it, get them out." He set the recipient to the number Father Michael had left on the pew, the parish landline that belonged to nobody and everybody. He hit send. The wheel tugged. He corrected, breath steady. The passenger in the pickup made a circular motion with his finger. "Roll the window down." Ray gave him another half inch, and the blank smile of a man who had already decided how he intends to die. "Follow us in," the passenger said. "We'll take you to the office." "Office," Ray repeated. Right. He saw it all now. The route into a back lot where cameras fed not to the city, but to a server that wore a different name each month. A door with a badge reader. A room with a drain that wasn't for mopping. He could drive into it as ordered and let them build a story out of him. Or he could write his own last paragraph. He flashed the blinker like a polite man and didn't turn. Instead, he nudged the Peterbilt forward until the pickup had to match speed. The SUV edged closer, reading his intent as if it were a billboard. "Luis," he said, voice calm as an old road. "Grab the duffel, the notebook, the tag. Put them in Mateo's hands. When I give you the word, you two go. You run crooked, through shadows, not lines. You do not look back." Mateo lifted his head. "Ray." "Do not look back," Ray said, the steel in it closing the argument. They reached the mouth of the freight yard. Ahead, chain-link fencing ran in a long, tired line. A gate sat open to the width of a truck and a lie. Just beyond, the switch house rose. A cinder block cube with a painted number and a tin roof that had kept 20 winters off the relay inside. A figure stood by the fence, hands in coat pockets, hair plastered by the leftover mist. Small, not fragile. A woman, watching everything. Ava, he thought, and felt the truck choose for him. "Now," he said. Luis shoved the duffel and the evidence into Mateo's arms. Ray reached down and yanked the cable to release the fifth wheel lock. The sound of the trailer disconnecting was a deep mechanical cough, a throat clearing before a verdict. He cranked the wheel left and hit the brake hard enough to make the cab kneel. The flatbed surged forward on momentum, then skated, then began to jackknife. The gray container slewed across the service road like a metal door swung by a giant. The pickup lunged to avoid it and clipped the container hard, its front quarter crunching, airbag blooming like a white flower that had learned all the wrong lessons. "Out!" Ray roared, throwing the passenger door open. "Go, go!" Mateo moved first, small and fast, the duffel tight to his ribs, eyes like chips of obsidian. Luis vaulted after him. They hit the ground running, dove under the chain link gap where a missing tie made a mouth, and tucked into the tall grass on the other side. The woman at the fence, Ava, it had to be Ava, stepped forward, eyes blazing with both fear and recognition. Behind them, men poured out of the SUV, guns up, their steps synchronous and eager. One shouted Ray's name like a curse that had learned to walk. Another raised a hand and made a sign Ray hadn't seen since sand and night and a different country. Ray took his pistol from the holster. It felt old and exactly right in his palm. He chambered around and let the slide sing. The SUV slewed sideways to block the yard entrance. A man in a dark jacket, no badge but the word compliance in the way he held himself, strode toward the cab, shouting over the engines. "Driver, step out with your hands up. This is a private security matter. You are in breach." "Of what?" Ray called back. "Human decency?" The man smiled as if someone else had said a joke at a party he tolerated. "Of contract." Ray felt something hot and clean move through him. "I shredded that contract," he said. "Come get the confetti." He fired a single shot into the air over their heads. Not a warning, an announcement. The men flinched, recalibrated, lifted their muzzles. Ray dropped behind the wheel well and fired twice, measured and mean. One round took a side mirror off the SUV. The other punched a hole in a tire, with a noise that sounded like a man deciding not to lie. Return fire stitched the hood. Glass exploded from the passenger window in powdered light. The pickup driver, still stunned by the airbag, clawed at it like a swimmer grabbing at a wave. A round bit the driver's side door near Ray's belly and spat rust. He moved, low and quick, to the front of the cab, using the engine block for cover. A ricochet whined past his ear, a small, insistent mosquito of death. He counted breaths. He counted hearts. He gave ground, not at all. Across the fence, Luis and Mateo reached the switch house. The woman met them, short hair, rain jacket, a face that had learned to listen for a living. She took the duffel, checked its weight, looked back at Ray with eyes that said, "I see you, and we are out of time." "Run the back line," Ray yelled. "Stay with the rail spur." Ava nodded once. She shouted something Ray couldn't hear, and the three of them vanished along the fence, their bodies folding into the geometry of weeds and shadow. The compliance man realized the handoff had happened on his watch. His smile died. "Take the driver," he snapped. They came in a rush. Ray fired until the slide locked back, then slammed home his last magazine. He shifted left to throw off their angles. One of them tried to flank, and Ray caught him center mass with a round that folded him like a question mark. Another took cover behind a barrel and sprayed without cadence. Ray stayed where he knew the pattern would get him killed and moved when it changed. The pickup behind the jackknifed trailer revved, trying to grind free. The gray container groaned and settled harder, a 50-foot barricade no one had asked for and everyone deserved. For an absurd second, the number painted on its side, 42, looked like a clock face telling him he was on time. A shot found him then, hot and mean, a punch high and right that spun him against the fender. Breath vanished. Then another, lower, a hook under the ribs he couldn't step out of. The world tilted. The noise of engines and men became a faraway river that had decided to run uphill. He slid down the wheel well, one knee refusing to remember its job. The pistol was still in his hand. The blood was warm as bathwater and smelled like pennies and old sorrow. The compliance man walked forward now, certain again, gun low, eyes bright with the arithmetic of how far men can push other men and still get invited to lunch. "Mr. Harper," he said, almost fond, "you should have taken the office." Ray spat pink and laughed because he could. "You should have taken a different job." The man sighed. We'll retrieve the property and the subjects. You'll be a footnote in a lawsuit nobody reads. Ray let his head rest against the fender and wished for one impossible cigarette. You're late, he said. For a heartbeat, the man's brow furrowed. Then the world filled with diesel and air horns. 2 rigs roared onto the service road shoulder to shoulder, bull bars gleaming, hazard strobes blinking like carnival saints. They were big and ugly and perfect. One was hauling a flatbed of pipe. The other carried nothing but attitude and a driver who had heard something on Channel 19 and decided conscience was an exit worth taking. They didn't hit anyone. They didn't have to. They thundered between the SUV and the fence like saints of momentum, forced the men to scatter, then stopped broadside in a way that would give every insurance adjuster in the county an ulcer. A driver leaned out and hollered words Ray couldn't make out, but recognized by rhythm as invitations to reconsider. The compliance man swore, broke eye contact, turned to direct his chaos. Ray used the second he'd bought and the chaos the road had delivered to roll onto his side and sight in. He didn't aim for men. He aimed for radiators and kneecaps and tires, the parts of a pursuit that make it move. He put a round into the SUV's other front tire and smiled when the nose dropped like a bull that had finally met the dirt. Luis and Mateo and the reporter were gone along the fence line now, swallowed by the rail spur's curve and the weedy geometry beyond. Ray let that fact bloom in him like a slow, stubborn sun. The pickup bucked free of the container with a screech and lurched toward him. He had 1 round left and the kind of choice men write about badly after. He squeezed. The windshield starred. The truck wobbled, kissed the jackknife trailer in a shower of sparks, and stalled. Engine gasping like a fish on a dock that had opinions. Silence is never really silent, not in a city. But something like it fell. A stunned pocket into which breath crept cautiously. Ray tried to stand, and his body wrote him a letter that began with the words, "Not advisable," and ended with "Sit a while." He did. The compliance man came back to himself with a jerk and raised his pistol to make an ending out of a middle. Before he could stitch the last line, the older of the 2 rig drivers stepped out with a length of cheater pipe across his shoulder and the kind of look only men who live by hours can muster. "How about you holster that, Chief?" he said. "Lot of cameras around for a private matter." There were, suddenly. Phones had bloomed from pockets. Warehouse workers had wandered to the loading bays like deer to salt. One of the rigs had a dash cam that winked a red LED like a conscience. The man took it all in. He had learned to measure optics as well as outcomes. His gun dipped, then disappeared beneath his jacket like a magic trick done for nobody's pleasure. He backed away once, twice, eyes on Ray with a promise that had the shape of later. Ray's hands shook. He found the burner by feel, fumbled, got it lit. He typed without seeing much. At Switch House now. Evidence secure. Keller tied to tag. Tell Ava. Don't come to road. Head north along spur. He hit send to the only number that mattered, then let the phone slip to the cab floor with a soft, unremarkable click. In the mirror, he caught a final sight of them. 3 figures flickering through the tall grass and the broken fencing, small and fast and alive. The reporter turned once, searching the road, and Ray couldn't help himself. He lifted a hand a fraction, the smallest salute. Palm outward, a sign that wasn't military and was. She must have seen it. She touched 2 fingers to her brow. Then she was gone. The compliance crew gathered what dignity it could, traded clipped words into radios with names that changed shape in transit, and retreated. They would be back with clean trucks and dirtier lawyers. The rigs idled like large, benevolent animals. Someone asked Ray a question he couldn't taste. Someone else put a hand on his shoulder and said something about ambulances. Sirens threaded the air from far away, a skein of sound heading toward them with best intentions and complicated paperwork. Ray set his head back against steel that had known too much heat and not enough love. He thought of Darnell saying pancakes like a future tense. He thought of the chains in the gray box that had learned his name and let go. He thought of the first time he'd climbed into a truck and the last time he'd remembered why. "Delivery made," he said to nobody in particular, and found it funny enough to grin. He watched the sky shift through 1,000 blue ideas. He listened to the city's great animal breath. He let the ache spread the way light does at evening, generous and indiscriminate. When the sirens grew louder, he reached for the medal that hung on a thin chain under his shirt. The small Marine's emblem he swore he didn't care about and wore anyway. He curled his fingers around it and felt the etchings press into his palm. Tiny geography that said, "You were here." Somewhere beyond the fence, a woman with a notebook and 2 men in institutional orange hurried toward a truth big enough to fight back. Somewhere behind Ray, a container with a number painted in white decided it was tired of keeping secrets. He closed his eyes. The hum of the Peterbilt's cooling engine was a lullaby nobody writes down. The city that had been a distant promise walked closer on 1,000 tired feet. He breathed in, breathed out, and let the road have the last word. 2 days later, the story broke like a dam giving way. Every news feed, every radio, every late-night host who still believed in conscience ran the same headline in words that glowed across America's sleepless screens. Private prison cartel exposed. Evidence points to human trafficking network tied to logistics firms. Ava McKenna's voice led the broadcasts, calm and razor sharp. She spoke from the Austin Sentinel's newsroom. Sleeves rolled up, eyes rimmed red, but burning with a kind of fire that can't be faked. Her report ran nearly 15 minutes, a lifetime in airtime. She named companies, showed photos, the duffel bag of names, the chains, the interior of Container 42. She traced the contracts to Keller Transport Solutions and their shell network of correctional contractors. Her closing line echoed everywhere that day. Somebody always drives the truck. The question is, what are they carrying, and who pays to keep them quiet? The footage cut to a wide shot, the wrecked Peterbilt still half buried in the mud off a service road east of the city, lights from police cruisers painting its chrome in blue and red. The camera panned slowly to the container, tilted, its side ripped open like a wound. Inside, viewers could see what Ray Harper had seen. Chains bolted to the floor, tally marks along the wall, blood turned brown by sun. The networks blurred nothing. They said it all began when an anonymous drive arrived at the Sentinel offices overnight. A padded envelope containing a flashcard, a burner phone, and a Marine Corps emblem, scratched and worn smooth with years. Ava didn't name her source on air. She didn't have to. The 3 days after the broadcast, a crowd gathered on a low ridge outside Austin, truckers, vets, parish folks from Father Michael's church, and a handful of reporters who knew enough to stand back. They came to see a convoy of semis pull off the highway and idle side by side, air horns sounding in slow unison. It wasn't a funeral. Not really. No body had been released yet. But every driver there knew what it meant when one of their own stopped coming through the way stations. They stood in the wind, caps off, diesel in their lungs, as one old driver read a few words Ava had written for them. Ray Harper carried what others wouldn't. He saw what was in the dark and drove toward daylight anyway. He didn't ask for saints or statues, just that the road remember him kind. Luis and Mateo were there too, wearing borrowed clothes and quiet faces. Mateo held Darnell's dog tag. The priest had found it tucked into Ray's glove box. Luis kept a folded copy of the Sentinel story in his back pocket. When the horns died down, the priest stepped forward and handed them an envelope. Inside were a few bills, a bus ticket north, and a note in Ray's handwriting. Shaky, written sometime before that last run. If you're reading this, the delivery's done. Don't waste the road. Keep going. They didn't cry right then. Some debts are too large for tears. Weeks later, Keller Transport Solutions shut its doors. Federal agents walked out their office staff in neat rows while cameras clicked. Somewhere in Washington, a hearing was scheduled that promised accountability, though nobody who'd been there believed much in promises. Ava kept digging, publishing name after name. Father Michael's church became a quiet station for those still missing brothers, sons, and fathers. And once a month, at the diner off Route 10, the one where the coffee tasted like history and the jukebox only worked on even days, 2 plates of pancakes were ordered and left untouched on the counter. The waitress never asked who for. That dawn, the old Peterbilt was hauled from the service road, towed to a yard outside town. The tow operator, a grizzled man who'd been driving rigs since before seatbelts were law, found a small thing tucked under the driver's seat. A leather wallet, worn soft, with a single photo inside. A woman and a little boy standing by a pickup years ago. On the back, in faded ink, was written, "For every mile you don't regret." He didn't tell anyone about it, just placed it back, shut the door, and stood for a long time beside the cab before walking away. When the light hit the truck's hood, the chrome caught it and scattered it into 1,000 points, like the road itself was remembering. The highway runs on, endless as it ever was. Out past Midland, through El Paso, across the dry bones of the desert. Truckers still talk about the Marine who took the wrong run. They don't call him a hero. Truckers don't use words like that. But when the night gets too long, they sometimes check their mirrors, half expecting to see a gray rig in the distance, lights steady, running the lane like a ghost with someplace left to go. They swear, if you listen close when the CB static clears, you can hear a man's voice. Low, calm, with that desert drawl, say, "Keep the rubber side down, boys. And if somebody offers you a job with no questions, maybe that's your first one." And then the world moves on, as it always does. But somewhere between El Paso and Austin, on a patch of highway that still bears the faint scars of burned rubber and rain, a small roadside cross stands crooked in the dirt. Someone's carved into it, with a truck key or maybe a pocket knife. Ray Harper. He made the delivery. The wind hums through the mesquite, carrying a single truth too big for silence. Thank you for listening to this story. If you liked it, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support keeps these roads alive, and it's what inspires new stories to be told. Run hard, run honest. The load's never just what's in the trailer.